So now let's begin our last lesson on monopoly. And we're going to look at why we consider monopoly to be efficient. Remember, in a perfectly competitive market, we said firms were operating at an efficient price and efficient quantity of output. But monopoly is inefficient economically. So why is that the case? Well, monopolies earn profits for their owners, but they result in an inefficient allocation of resources. In the figure on this table, note how the market demand curve is above the marginal cost curve. The marginal demand curve is here, the marginal cost curve is right here, and so the demand curve, in most cases, is above the marginal cost curve until the two curves intersect at this point right here. Since the height of the demand curve shows us the amount consumers are willing and able to pay for each unit, we can conclude that every unit up to the 7th, right here, is worth more to consumers than the cost of making it. It is thus an efficient use of resources to make all those 7 units. Now, in a perfectly competitive market, the supply curve is based on marginal cost. You've learned that the intersection of supply and demand determines the market quantity. So a perfectly competitive market facing the same marginal cost as the monopoly in this figure would produce 7 units of output. But because a monopoly restricts the quantity of output to 4 units, right here, where marginal revenue equals marginal cost, the monopolist's quantity of output is inefficiently small. Consumers would be willing to purchase additional units of output for a price that exceeds the cost of producing those units. So let's examine the inefficiently low output of a monopoly by considering specifics about monopoly's demand and output. We'll assume that consumers buy 1 unit of the software if the price is right, but no customer needs more than 1. Good software is important, but consumers are only willing to pay so much for it. If you are in the market for something, the highest price you would pay is known as your reservation price. In Chapter 4, we saw how the height of the demand curve at each quantity represents the most a consumer is willing to pay for that unit, the reservation price for that unit. Now, the table right here lists the reservation prices of Monopoly's 8 potential customers for its window shade software product in descending order. We have already seen that the firm's profit maximizing quantity is 4, and its profit maximizing price is $6. Notice that for $6, Adrian, Bree, Cody, and Deshaun, these customers right here, would all be willing to buy the software because they're all willing to pay more than $6. If the price fell to $5, then Evan would be willing to buy the software and 5 units would be sold. But the monopolist is unwilling to produce and sell the 5th unit, even though it costs $2 less to produce than Evan is willing to pay. Why would Monopoly forego this apparent gain from trade and cause inefficiency by preventing Evan from receiving software that is worth more to him than the marginal cost? Because if Monopoly were to lower its price to $5 in order to sell the 5th unit, it would receive $1 less from Adrian, Bree, Cody, and Deshaun, who were all willing to pay at least $6. Monopoly's reservation from the first 4 units would then fall by $4, and Evan would pay $5 for the 5th unit, so the marginal revenue would only be $1. Monopoly is wise to keep the price at $6 rather than paying the marginal cost of $3 to only gain $1 in revenue. Because you never want to sell something if the marginal cost of producing it is greater than the marginal revenue you receive from selling it. So far, we've assumed that Monopoly has to charge all its customers the same price. We saw that charging a lower price to Evan would require the monopolist to charge a lower price to Adrian, Bree, Cody, and Deshaun as well. Lowering the price to get Evan's business would decrease the firm's profit. Therefore, Monopoly passed up the opportunity to sell to Evan. Now, let's explore the possibility that Monopoly does not have to charge everyone the same price. In that case, the firm could raise its profits by charging each customer his or her reservation price, assuming that price could be determined. Monopoly would like to charge Adrian $9, charge Bree $8, charge Cody $7, and so on, all the way down to Greg. Monopoly would not sell a unit to Holly because her reservation price of $2 is below Monopoly's marginal cost of $3. Monopoly receives more profit by price discriminating than by charging all customers the same price. We know this because with price discrimination, Adrian, Bree, and Cody pay more than the $6 they would pay if the firm charged a single price. Deshawn pays the same amount as before, and Evan and Fernando contribute to profit as well by buying units for a price that exceeds marginal cost. Thus, firms with market power prefer to charge customers their reservation prices if they can. The practice of charging different customers different prices for the same good is called price discrimination. 4 conditions must be met before a firm can price discriminate. First, some customers must have higher reservation prices than others for the same good. Second, the firm must be able to distinguish between customers with higher and lower reservation prices. Third, it cannot be possible for customers to resell the good. If the resale of window shade were possible, for example, Evan would buy 5 units at his reservation price of $5 and resell them to Adrian, Bree, Cody, and Deshawn, who have higher reservation prices and thus are charged more by Monopoly. And fourth, the firm must have market power. Under perfect competition, competitors would enter and drive the price down to the marginal cost of production. It is easiest for firms to distinguish between whole groups of customers. For example, price discrimination is often practiced between younger and older age groups. When individual customers are charged their reservation price, this is called perfect price discrimination. Have you ever gone car shopping with your family? If so, you may have heard people at the car dealership ask questions that help them learn your family's reservation price. Sometimes they ask direct questions like, how much would you like to spend for a car today? They may also ask questions about where you live, what your family members do for a living, and what type of car your family owns now. This information helps the seller guide your family to a car and a price that matches your reservation price and maximizes the seller's profit. Perfect price discrimination removes the inefficiency that arises when a firm charges all customers the same price. Recall that Evan has a reservation price of $5 for window shade, and Monopoly can produce another unit of window shade for $3. If it had to charge everyone the same price, Monopoly wouldn't sell Evan the software for $5 because it would lose more money by lowering its price for other buyers than it would gain by selling a unit to Evan. The lost opportunity to sell a unit that is worth more to a buyer than it costs a seller to make causes inefficiency. But price discrimination prevents Monopoly from having to lower the price on other units in order to sell one more. With perfect price discrimination, Monopoly would sell a unit of window shade to everyone willing to pay at least as much as the $3 marginal cost of making a unit. This includes Evan, who would pay $5, Fernando, who would pay $4, and Greg, who would pay $3. To maximize profit, a price discriminating monopolist will increase output until the marginal cost is equal to the reservation price of the last customer. That brings the firm to produce every unit for which the reservation price exceeds the marginal cost. Price discrimination thus results in an efficient level of production. Despite the favorable output level, price discrimination is not without its problems. Think about your own buying experiences. You're happiest when the price you pay is well below your reservation price. For example, suppose you're thinking of buying some red paint to fix up an old skateboard that you're going to sell. If you're convinced that the price you could fetch for the skateboard would be $10 higher if it had a new paint job, the most you would pay for the paint is $10. The real gain from a purchase comes from paying less for a good than it is worth to you. If the paint cost $10, there would be little point in buying it. But if you paid $6 for it, your benefit would exceed the price, so you would have reason to feel good about the purchase. Likewise, if every customer had to pay his or her reservation price for a good, The customers would be indifferent between buying it or not. Their net gain from the purchase would be zero. By tailoring the price to equal the reservation price, the firm manages to extract all the gains from trade. No wonder firms look for ways to price discriminate. Now, many familiar pricing schemes are actually versions of price discrimination. Let's look at 3 examples. You may know that airlines charge different prices for the same seat on the same flight. These pricing policies are designed so that people with higher reservation prices pay higher ticket prices. For example, business travelers, whose employers pay for their tickets, typically have higher reservation prices than vacationers who must pay for their own tickets. To distinguish between business travelers from vacationers, airlines note that vacationers usually plan their trips farther in advance and are more likely to travel over weekends. To benefit from this, the airlines charge more for tickets when the departure date is near and for trips that do not include a Saturday night stay. Another familiar example of price discrimination takes place in movie theaters. You probably remember that when you were under the age of 12, you received a discount on movie tickets. Because children have a lower reservation price than adults, a movie theater can use age to separate its customers and charge more to those with a higher willingness to pay. Finally, many restaurants give discounts to senior citizens. Why? Because senior citizens generally have a lower willingness to pay for eating out. By giving senior citizens a discount, restaurants can gain more customers while charging more to those who are willing to pay more. Many movie theaters, grocery stores, and vacation destinations price discriminate with senior discounts as well. Notice that none of these examples of price discrimination constitutes perfect price discrimination. Rather than charging each individual his or her reservation price, the prices are assigned to whole groups that include members with differing reservation prices. Real estate agents and car dealers often come closer to achieving perfect price discrimination. Their one-on-one interactions with buyers allow them to assess each buyer's interests and ability to pay. They may size up buyers by observing their clothing, their jewelry, seeing how eager they are to make a purchase, and asking about their occupation and financial situation. This helps them negotiate a price that is closer to the buyer's reservation price. So when you go out to purchase a home, don't wear your most expensive clothes. And don't say you're so in love with the house or so in love with the car you want to buy that you'd pay an arm and a leg for it, or you actually might. Innovative new products improve our standard of living and promote economic growth. Investments in research and product development are the fuel of innovation. But while we know that monopolies charge higher prices and produce smaller quantities, the effect of monopoly on innovation is less clear. Due to contrasting influences, it turns out that monopoly power can either advance innovation or get in its way. The relatively high profits conferred by monopoly power can be invested in research and development projects. This supports innovation. For example, when AT&T was still a monopoly, the research budget of its Bell Laboratories exceeded the entire research budget of the Japanese Ministry of Industry and Trade. The inventions made at Bell Laboratories included the transistor, a critical component in TVs, computers, cell phones, cars, and hundreds of other products. On the other hand, we have seen that monopolists have an interest in protecting their monopoly power by thwarting would-be competitors who might offer better products. Some of the profit that could be spent on innovation might be spent on barriers to entry. For example, monopolists can use some of their profit to lobby politicians for protection along the lines of extended patents, limits on competition from other countries, or stricter licensing requirements for competitors. Even that great defender of free markets, Adam Smith, worried that powerful merchants and manufacturers, pursuing their own self-interest, would seek to use government regulation to their advantage. George Washington was so concerned by this potential problem that in his farewell address he warned, "Even our commercial policy should hold an equal and impartial hand, neither seeking nor granting exclusive favors or preferences." Such defensive posturing by monopolists can slow the pace of technological improvement.